introduce my sister Doris, who has prayerfully and painstakingly, maybe, decided to come and share with us. And so we're blessed for that. And Doris, if you would come and share, we would be blessed. So.
I can't believe they trusted me with the mic. Anyway, I think I forgot at some point in my life, just so you know, that my box was checked. Jason asked me a couple of weeks ago to talk, and I hesitated at first because it's not something very easy for me to do. But the more I thought about it, I thought if it can help somebody else, if I share my story and it will help somebody else, then that's the right thing to do. Amen. So I'm going to start with my story, and I'm sorry it's not as short as Megan's. I'm a little older. I grew up in a house that was filled with love. My parents never argued. They went to church on Sunday. We went to church on Sunday. And that was the thing we did. And we all knew we were loved. In junior high, my best friend, Connie Hall, who I know is kind of related to some of you here, went to a different church and invited me to go to her church camp. And we were there for about a week. And while I was there the last night around the campfire, I felt something stirring in my heart. And I thought, I just didn't understand what to do with that feeling, but I knew there was something there. We went to bed that night, and I couldn't sleep, and I went outside and I sat under the tree the whole night and sat and talked and prayed to God and asked Him for direction in my life. And the next morning, I was baptized in the river there, and the feeling I had when I came out of that river was just amazing. And I lived a good portion of my life for a long time, following in what I thought were the footsteps of God. I later, after college, married my high school sweetheart. Yes, we were in love. I was still in love years later, too. However, things were not always pretty as they seemed, and what's on the outside of doors doesn't always tell you what's going on behind doors. My husband was a very loving man. He loved other people's children. He loved his own children. But he could not always relate to his own children, but other children would flock to him. He had a lot of anger, and unfortunately, he took that anger out on his family. And when things went wrong, it was always somebody in our house's fault. It could have been miles away, but it was our fault, and we had to deal with that. Sometimes it was just emotional abuse, verbal abuse, but oftentimes there was some physical abuse. So there was a very dark side of him, and I would sometimes leave for weeks or months, but it seemed like, and don't ask me, I can't explain this because I know it's something that abusive people do, but we came back. We came back because we loved him. We came back because we forgave him. So we always came back to that, but we never knew if at any moment our lives might be in danger. And so as time went on, this pattern continued. And then I'm going to jump forward several years. About 6.5 years ago, I lost my mother on the last day of school. It was the same year my youngest son would graduate from high school in a couple of days. And I had talked all along, I felt it would be an honor to walk in with the teachers in our gowns and robes because it was my son's graduation, and I just felt that was what I felt my heart to do. But my husband didn't have that same feeling. He felt I should be with the family. And we got an argument over it. And the night before graduation, he started in first on that, and then he just started bad-mouthing my mother and saying what a horrible person she was and how she should have died years ago. And I said, I just can't handle this. And I got in my car and I said, I'm going for a drive, which is what I did if I got too upset. So I went for a drive, and my kids later came home, and they said, Mom, I don't know how you're going to get in the house tonight. The doors are all locked. We never locked our doors. We didn't know where the keys were. The doors were all locked. The house was not just locked, it was barricaded. He had furniture moved in front of the doors. So the next morning was my son's graduation, and the next afternoon we had nothing to wear except the clothes on our back. We went out and thought, well, maybe he'll let us in. And we went out and he met us on the front porch with a gun. Said, get off the property or I'll kill you. So we left. My son's graduation robe was there, which he did later give to my son. But we went to Goodwill to shop for clothes for graduation. My husband, still angry, showed up at graduation, caused a scene. Not a scene where everybody saw it, but enough of us saw it, and my son, that it kind of ruined that day for us. He did not let us back in the house, and that night, my daughter and I decided, because we knew he was very emotionally upset, we decided we'd take a drive past the house just to be sure. If we thought lights were on the house, everything would be okay. And as we approached the house, we saw this huge glow in the sky, and outside my bedroom window was this huge bonfire. Now, I did not have to guess what was on that fire. And I found out several days later that everything I owned, as well as the things my mother had given me, had been burned in that fire. The next day, I buried my mother. Again, shopping at Goodwill for my clothes. I've lost my train of thought. Sorry. While I was after the funeral, the family decided that maybe I needed a break from all of this. I was very emotionally upset, and they says, my brother had not been able to make it back for the funeral because he had been very sick. And they says, why don't you just go to Arizona for a little while and see your brother and take some time away from all this. And so that's what we did. And unfortunately, while we were out there, we received the call that would change our lives forever. My husband had tragically committed suicide and had attempted to burn our house down in the process. My sons were left at home to deal with this situation, one being only 17 years old. Well, I sat in Arizona I could not get a flight back for almost 2 days. After the funeral was over, we had to start dealing with what to do about the house. It was unlivable. So we talked to the insurance company. He says, well, don't touch anything because I'm sure that it'll probably be covered. It's, your husband said it, it wasn't you, you're the homeowner now. I'm sure it will be covered. So I called them off and on, and they gave me the same story. Don't touch it, we're pretty sure it's going to be covered. The day before school started, they gave me the call. There's no coverage for your house. Now I had to go back to school and start teaching, and I had a house that I couldn't live in that was probably going to take months and months and months to repair, as well as money. And at this time, and years before too, I had started doubting God. And at this time I said, God, where are you? What have I ever done wrong? Why do I deserve this? I don't even think you exist. How do you exist and do things like this to people? And I started hardening my heart. It got harder. Eventually we got the house fixed up and we moved back in. And we were in the house just a little over a year. Matter of fact, today is the 5-year anniversary. On a day 5 years ago today, much like the weather today, it was the coldest day of the year that year. Wind was blowing. An electrical short in my garage started my house on fire. At about this time of the day, I watched the roof cave in on my house. The only thing left was the railing to the porch when it was all over. Community has been wonderful in these events. They've always kicked in and helped, and that meant a lot. And there was an anonymous donor who gave us 2 months of rent at a place nearby here so that our family could stay together, which meant so very much to us at that time. But God, where was he? He was nowhere to be found. No God here. Can't see him anywhere. He sure didn't help. And throughout all this, my youngest son, Ben, who still to this day will not talk about a single one of these events, and if he even mentions it, he gets very angry. His only relief that he could see, he turned to drugs. And of course, a mother's love is blind. I didn't see it for a long time. And he got deeper into drugs. And finally, when I realized it, we went to counseling. I sent him to counseling 2 times. He wasn't ready. It doesn't work if you're not ready. And he continued in drugs. And then one day, I saw him selling some drugs to a person on my property. And I know as a teacher, and just as a law-abiding citizen, this was not what I could tolerate. And I also knew that the only way I was going to save his life was to get him away from the drugs. And I called the sheriff, and they turned him in. The sheriff department showed up. Of course, being scared, he took off running. And I stood in my yard as I watched the sheriff's department pull guns and say, "Stop, or we'll shoot." And I thought I had not saved my son's life. I thought I had killed my son. It was a very terrifying moment. But he did get away. A month later, he was captured, later sentenced to 6 years in prison. My other son dealt with it a little bit better. He had one night at a bar with some friends. He had a little too much liquid courage, and a person who had been agitating him for over a year about different things came up to him and started it up again. He stood up and punched him twice and walked away. He was charged with felonious assault and sent to prison for 3 years. So now I have 2 sons in prison. And if there's one thing I do want to relate to this, first of all, I know they're safe there, I guess, in a sense, but if there's one thing that I want to relate to all this is I go to prison to visit them on occasions. I look around the room, and those criminals are no different than you and I. Had different life circumstances. They made some bad decisions. But I see love in that room when I look around. The love that God gives to his children. He doesn't judge them. He loves them no matter what. Just like I love my sons no matter what. So my prayer is that when they get out, they will be productive citizens that will be accepted by society. So with all of this, I just kept sinking deeper and deeper into a big black hole. I got more and more depressed. I was angry at the world. I was angry at God. I was angry at myself. I would sit oftentimes at night and just sit and cry for no reason. I just didn't even know why I was alive. And it wasn't suicidal, but I didn't even care if I lived. And then one night, one day at school, Diane Rollins found me. Asked me if I wanted to go to the girls' tournament basketball game with them. And I hadn't been to see any games that year, and this was a year ago, and I wanted to go see the game. So Diane says, "Well, why don't you ride with us?" And so I did. I thought, well, this will get me out of the house. And as we were riding, Diane started telling me about coming back to church here. What a great church community it was. The services were great. Maybe I would enjoy coming. But I made up a few excuses that night. It's not for me. But as I sat alone again other nights, I thought, maybe that's what I need to do. So one Sunday I decided I would come back. And somebody knew I was coming because they picked the songs that turned the key to my heart. And Jason said the words that opened it even farther. And as I sat there that morning, I cried the whole way through the service. And I realized that God hadn't forsaken me. I had slammed the door and barricaded it just like my husband had done to me, and I wouldn't let him in. So here I am. And I know she's not here this morning either, but there was one other very moving moment about a month ago. We were doing communion just today. And I sat in a pew, and maybe because I have sons in prison, it was more touching to me, I don't know. But I watched this Michael Fink walk back to the church and served his mother communion. 10-year-old boy who ignored his love of God and witnessed to God out front for everyone to see as I sit in that pew and walk out of church and do nothing. And I thought, what a blessing to have a son who can do that. This church has been a blessing for me. I just want to say that when Jason stands up here and says you need to go out and witness and show your love of God, it doesn't take somebody standing on a street corner waving a pamphlet saying, "Come to our church." It takes somebody saying, "Maybe you'd like to come to church," or a child showing their love of God. That's witnessing. You don't have to be a preacher and stand up here. And so I guess I just want to say thank you to this church community for making a difference in my life, because my heart has been opened again. And I hope that this just helps one person. It was worth this torture that I've gone through. Thank you very much. Amen.